Nobody saw this coming, not the fans, not the sisters, and definitely not the people who built an entire empire off the image of Braxton family unity. Because when Toni Braxton finally spoke, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She did something far more dangerous. She told the truth. It started with a single, leaked moment, a quiet confession that wasn't meant for cameras, wasn't meant for headlines, and definitely wasn't meant to blow the family wide open. But once those words escaped, there was no stopping the fallout. Toni Braxton, the most successful, most disciplined, most silent member of the family, allegedly revealed what fans have whispered about for years. She's been carrying everyone, financially, emotionally, and mentally, while they leaned back and lived comfortably in her shadow. And when she said, "If they weren't leaning on me, I would have soared higher," the internet froze. Because let's be clear, this isn't Tamar being explosive. This isn't reality TV dramatics. This is Toni, the woman who never talks, the woman who always protects the brand, the woman who swallowed resentment so the family could look whole. Until now. Suddenly, old clips feel different. Old arguments sound darker. Old smiles look forced. Fans are digging up interviews, backstage footage, and financial timelines that paint a picture far uglier than the polished sisterhood we were sold. Alleged secret payments, quiet bailouts, family members who depended on Toni's success while resenting her for it. And here's the scariest part. Insiders say this was only the beginning. Because once the strong one admits she's angry, once she admits she feels used, once she admits she doesn't even like her family anymore, there's no going back. And what's about to come out next could permanently shatter the Braxton legacy. The first crack didn't happen on camera. It happened behind closed doors, in conversations Toni Braxton never thought would leave the room. According to alleged insiders, this wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow emotional hemorrhage that had been happening for decades. Toni wasn't just the star of the family. She was the spine holding it upright. And when that spine finally bent, everything started to collapse. People forget that before the Grammys, before the sold-out tour, before the Vegas residencies, Toni was already carrying responsibilities that never belonged to her. When her mother was injured and the household shifted into survival mode, Toni became more than a daughter. She became a second parent. While her sisters learned how to sing, laugh, dream, and be carefree, Toni learned how to worry, how to plan, how to sacrifice quietly. That dynamic didn't disappear when fame arrived, it multiplied. Once the checks started coming in, so did the expectations. Allegedly, Toni's success wasn't treated as hers. It was treated as a solution, a fix, a fallback plan, a safety net everyone assumed would always be there. Insiders claim that if someone was short on rent, Toni handled it. If a business idea failed, Toni absorbed the loss. If a bill was overdue, the call didn't go to a bank, it went to her. And here's the part fans never saw. Toni rarely said no. Not because she wanted to play hero, but because she was conditioned not to. Family first. Don't rock the boat. Don't embarrass us. Don't let the world know we're struggling. Every boundary she considered setting came with guilt attached. If she pulled back, someone else would fall. That was the unspoken rule. But resentment doesn't disappear just because it's buried. It ferments. Sources say the real tension wasn't just about money, it was about entitlement. There's a difference between help and expectation, and allegedly, that line was crossed years ago. Toni wasn't being asked anymore. She was being assumed. Her success became communal property, while her stress, health scares, and emotional burnout were treated like inconveniences. And the cruel irony. While Toni was funding stability for others, her own financial foundation was quietly eroding. Behind the scenes, she was locked into predatory contracts that paid pennies compared to what she generated. Album after album went platinum, yet her personal accounts told a different story. 35 cents per album. That number still haunts fans who understand what that means. A global superstar selling millions and still struggling to stay afloat, all while supporting multiple households. Insiders claim that when Toni tried to explain the pressure she was under, it was often dismissed. "You're Toni Braxton. You'll figure it out. You always do." That expectation became a cage. Then came the health crises: lupus, heart complications, doctors warning her to slow down, her body begging for rest. And yet the demands didn't stop. Tour continued. Shows were booked. Obligations piled up. When she had to cancel performances due to illness and insurance refused to cover the losses, the financial hit was devastating. And still, according to sources, she didn't pull back from supporting her family. That's when something inside her shifted. People close to Toni say she started asking herself questions she'd never allowed before. What would my life look like if I wasn't responsible for everyone? Who would I be if I didn't have to save anyone? And the answer terrified her, not because it was selfish, but because it felt true. She would have soared higher. That sentence wasn't just regret, it was grief. Grief for the albums she never made, the risks she never took, the rest she never allowed herself, the joy she postponed indefinitely because someone else always needed something first. And grief has a way of turning into anger when it sits too long. Behind the scenes of the family's return to television, insiders say the tension was suffocating. Old wounds reopened under bright lights. Pay disparities resurfaced. Resentments that were never resolved got amplified by cameras and contracts. Toni and Tamar were paid more, and while that made sense on paper, it reignited feelings of imbalance and jealousy that had never truly healed. Arguments escalated. Filming halted more than once. At one point, Toni reportedly walked away entirely, saying she was done not just with the show, but with being the glue. And then there was the moment that changed everything. During a quiet, emotionally charged conversation, Toni was asked a question that hit too close to the truth. What would your life look like if they weren't leaning on you? Her response wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter. It was devastatingly honest. I would have soared higher. That wasn't shade. That was confession. And once that admission existed, there was no way to put the family narrative back into its old shape. Because if Toni Braxton, the most reserved, most loyal, most protective of the brand, is admitting she feels used, then the story we've been watching for years was missing its most important chapter. According to insiders, that conversation didn't just upset her sisters. It scared them, because it signaled something new. Toni wasn't just tired. She was awake. And when the strong one stops carrying the weight, everyone feels the drop. What happens next isn't about a TV storyline or a family argument. It's about what comes out when decades of silence finally crack. And the whispers suggest the next revelations won't just be emotional. They'll be financial, documented, and impossible to ignore. Because Toni Braxton didn't just hold the family together. She paid for it. And the moment she stops pretending she didn't, everything changes. By the time the family tried to spin it as just another emotional moment, it was already too late. The damage wasn't loud, it was surgical. Because once Toni Braxton admitted she felt weighed down by her own blood, people started asking questions they had never dared to ask before. And the answers, according to alleged insiders, were far uglier than anyone expected. Behind the scenes, financial conversations had allegedly been happening for years. Quiet, tense, uncomfortable talks that never made it on camera. Not arguments, not screaming matches, just Toni sitting there, calm but drained, explaining numbers while everyone else avoided eye contact. Sources claim she wasn't just helping occasionally. She was allegedly covering recurring expenses that never stopped. Mortgage payments that weren't hers. Car notes she didn't drive. Credit cards she didn't swipe. Business ventures she didn't believe in but still funded because family. And here's the twist that shocked fans when whispers leaked. The dependency didn't decrease as her health declined. It increased. While Toni was being hospitalized, while doctors warned her about stress-triggered flare-ups, insiders say requests kept coming. Subtle ones. Just this once. I'll pay you back. You know I'll always be there for you. Except the payback never came, and being there often meant emotional loyalty, not financial relief. The resentment wasn't one-sided either. Allegedly, some family members felt entitled to the support while simultaneously resenting Toni for being the provider. A toxic loop. She was needed, but also blamed. Admired, but also envied. And when money becomes tangled with sibling rivalry, it poisons everything it touches. According to a production source, this tension boiled over during filming when an argument turned unexpectedly raw. Not about old childhood wounds, not about fame, about money, about who was paying for what, about who was still struggling and who was expected to fix it. Cameras were reportedly shut down, microphones muted, but not before someone heard Toni say something that cut straight through the room. "I'm not your bank." That line never aired, but it spread like wildfire behind the scenes. Suddenly, people started connecting dots. Why Toni always looked detached during group scenes, why she pulled back emotionally, why she seemed exhausted even when nothing dramatic was happening on screen. It wasn't disinterest. It was burnout. The kind that comes from years of being the solution to everyone else's problems while no one solves yours. And then there were the alleged receipts. Whispers of financial spreadsheets, of canceled checks, of wire transfers marked family. Insiders claim Toni kept meticulous records, not to shame anyone, but to protect herself. After being burned by the industry, she learned the hard way that documentation mattered. And now, those records are being re-examined by fans who suddenly realized Toni's bankruptcies weren't about reckless spending. They were about carrying too much weight. Fans were stunned when old interviews resurfaced where Toni casually mentioned paying bills for people I love. At the time, it sounded generous, noble. Now it sounds like a warning she didn't know how to phrase yet. And when she said she hated her life at one point, really hated it, people finally understood why. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional neglect. Sources say when Toni needed support, the response was often silence. When she needed rest, she was told to push through. When she tried to set boundaries, she was made to feel selfish. And when she expressed anger, it was reframed as moodiness or diva behavior, anything but what it really was, years of unacknowledged sacrifice. Then came the moment that insiders say fractured the family beyond repair. A private conversation, meant to clear the air, reportedly turned into an accusation. Not shouted, whispered. Toni was told that without the family brand, she wouldn't be relevant, that her success was tied to them just as much as theirs was tied to her. That comment, according to sources, landed like a slap. Because if that were true, then why was she the only one paying? That was the moment Toni allegedly stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped defending herself. She didn't storm out. She didn't explode. She went quiet. And anyone who knows Toni knows that silence is her most dangerous move. Behind the scenes, she began pulling back not dramatically, but deliberately. Fewer calls returned, fewer financial rescues, fewer emotional check-ins. And that's when panic allegedly set in. Because for the first time, the family felt what it was like without Toni cushioning every fall. Social media sensed the shift immediately. Fans noticed the distance, the absence, the coldness where warmth used to be, and instead of sympathy, Toni faced backlash, accusations of abandonment, of changing, of thinking she was above them now. But insiders say the truth was simpler and sadder. She was done being drained. And just when everyone thought the situation couldn't get any more explosive, whispers began circulating about one final confrontation. A moment so brutal that it allegedly changed the way the sisters see each other forever. Because according to multiple sources, Toni didn't just express frustration. She allegedly laid everything out. Numbers, dates, patterns, years of dependency exposed in one devastating conversation, and the fallout from that moment hasn't stopped spreading. Because once you say out loud that the people you love depend on you financially, and that it's destroying you, there's no pretending anymore. And what comes next isn't reconciliation. It's reckoning. By the time word leaked that Toni had finally said everything she'd been swallowing for decades, the family wasn't just fractured, it was exposed. Not on camera, not in a confessional, but in a closed-door reckoning that insiders swear felt more brutal than any reality TV fight ever filmed. Because this time, there were no raised voices, just facts, and facts don't care who they hurt. According to multiple people close to the situation, Toni didn't cry during that final confrontation. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She simply told the truth, slowly, carefully, and without apology. She allegedly listed years of support like a ledger of love turned liability. Every bailout, every temporary arrangement that became permanent, every moment she chose family over her own peace. And when she finished, the room reportedly went silent in a way that felt permanent. That silence, insiders say, was when it finally hit everyone else. Because it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dependency masquerading as loyalty, about expectations disguised as love, about a family that had grown comfortable surviving off one person's sacrifice without ever asking what it was costing her. Sources claim one sister tried to deflect, bringing up old grievances, old hurts, old moments where Toni was distant or unavailable. But that defense collapsed fast, because Toni allegedly responded with a sentence that no one could argue with. "I was unavailable because I was exhausted from carrying all of you." That line didn't just sting, it detonated. From that moment on, the dynamic shifted. The familiar narrative, Toni as the strong one, the provider, the fixer, cracked wide open. And in its place was something far more uncomfortable: accountability. Because once you admit someone has been holding you up, you have to admit what happens if they let go. Insiders say that's when emotions spiraled. Guilt surfaced. Resentment flared. Old rivalries reignited. Not because Toni was wrong, but because she was finally right out loud. And for some people, that's harder to accept than blame. Behind the scenes, the fallout reportedly spread fast. Text threads went cold. Group chats fell silent. Family gatherings became scheduling conflicts. And for the first time, Toni wasn't the one chasing resolution. She stopped calling first, stopped smoothing things over, stopped absorbing everyone else's discomfort just to keep the peace. That alone sent shockwaves through the family. Because when the person who always bends finally stands still, everyone else has to adjust. And not everyone was ready for that. Social media, meanwhile, was unraveling the story in real time. Old clips resurfaced, moments that once looked playful now felt loaded. Fans dissected body language, side glances, unfinished sentences. A throwaway comment about helping out suddenly sounded like a cry for help. And the public, once divided, started leaning hard in Toni's direction. The narrative flipped. Instead of "Why is Toni so distant?" people asked, "Why was she expected to carry everyone?" Instead of "She should keep the family together," the question became, who was protecting her? That shift didn't go unnoticed. Insiders claim the pressure from public opinion sparked panic behind closed doors. Because once fans start asking about finances, about dependency, about who benefited from whom, the illusion cracks. And that's when alleged damage control kicked in. Carefully worded statements, vague interviews, emotional language without specifics, anything to soften the blow without addressing the core issue. But Toni didn't participate. She went quiet. No clapbacks, no explanations, no emotional posts, just distance. And for someone who spent her life being accessible, that silence spoke louder than any expose ever could. According to people close to her, Toni reached a breaking point where she finally accepted something devastating but freeing. Loving people doesn't mean saving them. And being family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until there's nothing left. That realization, insiders say, didn't come without grief. Because even when you're right, walking away from the role you were born into hurts, especially when that role defined you, especially when it came with praise, dependence, and a sense of purpose. Letting go meant facing who she was without being needed, and that terrified her more than any argument ever had. But it also healed her. Sources say Toni began setting boundaries that shocked everyone. Financial boundaries, emotional boundaries, time boundaries, and every boundary felt like betrayal to people who had never learned how to stand without leaning on her. That's when whispers of permanent distance started circulating. Not estrangement, something colder, something quieter. A polite separation where love exists but access does not. Where Toni shows up when she chooses, not when she's summoned. Where help is offered, not assumed. And that shift, insiders warn, may be irreversible. Because once you stop being the solution, People are forced to confront their own problems, and not everyone wants that. As filming continues and old wounds reopen, sources say there's one unresolved bomb still ticking beneath the surface. One conversation that hasn't happened yet. One truth Toni hasn't said out loud, not because she's afraid, but because she knows once she does, there's no going back. And the scariest part, the family knows it. They feel it in her absence, in her calm, in the way she no longer rushes to fix what breaks. The power dynamic has shifted, and everyone is waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because if Toni Braxton, the woman who held everyone together, finally chooses herself completely, the family won't just have to adjust. They'll have to survive without her. And that realization is sending shockwaves that haven't finished rippling yet. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just another celebrity family spat. This is a slow-burning emotional earthquake, and we're still standing right on the fault line. What you're witnessing is history rewriting itself in real time, and the next move could change everything we think we know about the Braxton family forever. This is the kind of story people swear they'll catch up on later, until later comes, and they realize they missed the moment everyone else was talking about. Don't let that be you. Because trust me, this saga is far from finished. The silence, the boundaries, the unresolved tension, those are not endings. Those are warnings. And when the next revelation drops, when someone finally breaks ranks, when the truth that's been sitting in the shadows comes out, it's going to hit fast and it's going to hit hard. So if you're invested, if you care about what really happens behind the scenes, if you want to be part of the conversation before the narrative gets rewritten again, now is the moment. Hit that like button so this story keeps circulating. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this debate is only getting louder. And most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications, not later, not tomorrow, right now. Because when the next chapter unfolds, you don't want to hear about it secondhand. You want to be right here when it breaks.